Good evening, everybody. So, welcoming everyone to share your session. And everybody who's here in person right now has been here before when we've done this. But for anybody who is looking at the recording who hasn't, this is something we do as a feature of study hall once a month or so, where we have somebody show how they actually use things in practice. And it's because, we go to classes and we learn techniques, but the way that we use them when we use them on ourselves or when we integrate them with other modalities or something like that is often very different. So it allows us to get a perspective on things from people who are using it as actual practitioners. And so a few months ago, I had put out to the group, what are some things we would like to learn more about? And one of the suggestions, I think it was Lisa actually, who's here tonight, who had made the suggestion, was to learn more about Donna Eden's work and Eden energy medicine. And the second that that came up, I went, I know someone who is lovely, who we would just be thrilled to have come talk to us, and who not only does Eden energy medicine work, but also integrates it with modalities like Touch for Health and Gems and Sips and things that a lot of us are more familiar with. So we've invited Paige to come and hang out with us for a little bit tonight. So I will stop talking and let her take over. Thank you, Paige.
You're welcome. Thank you, Alexis. My name's Paige Hodapp. I live in Michigan in the United States, although I lived for 20 years in Great Britain. And it was in Great Britain that I first came across Brain Gym and then Touch for Health and then Leap with Charles Krebs and Hugo Tobar's classes, and it was a brilliant time to be living in the United Kingdom because it was fairly easy to get around. And this was when SIPS had barely begun. I mean, it was like SIPS was just SIPS. And I know some of my colleagues were taking this SIPS class. And so it was in the very early days because this would have been 94 to 2004. Um, and so I don't have someone to demonstrate on, but I'm hoping that if you all are able to self muscle test, we can try some things tonight. So anyhow, I just wanted to say, so after going through Hugo and Charles, and then even Sips, which I didn't have any of, but it's along the same line. I was uh, uh I was kind of tired of my kinesiology is I've got more points than you have, and mine is more difficult than you, and I can do more of this than you can. And I was just like up to here with all that. And then I moved back to the States to take care of my mom after my dad died. And I came across Donna Eden's work. And Donna, as you may know, started out in Touch for Health in the early days. And because she can see energy, then over the years created her own system. And so I started, there's a woman an hour from here who was teaching the year one classes, and I'm always up to learn something new. So I started doing that. And it was for me just such a relief. I know does yin kinesiology, but Donna is really yin kinesiology versus the yang kinesiology of learning all this different stuff. And so I really, really enjoy it. And I've been through all 4 years. So really I kind of present myself as the Eden Energy Medicine practitioner, and then I will if nothing comes up, okay, this is something from SIPS, or this is something from Leap, or this is something from another thing that I know, or it's from that book over on the shelf. And I'll go with whatever the body indicates it needs. Um, but what I really like about Donna's work is that we work in a number of different systems. And Alexis probably knows some of these things, but I had never been introduced them before. So I remember I was in a SIPS class with somebody with I was in one of Alexis's SIPS class and I had balanced somebody and then Alexis said to the person I had just balanced, why don't you come up here and let me do something on you? So like I was sitting watching what Alexis was doing and I'm like, Alexis, are you balancing her assemblage point? And Alexis goes, yeah. And I'm like, oh, in energy medicine, that's a very sacred process. And we would never do that with someone that we didn't know really well. So it was just so fun to know that some of the things that I was introduced to in Eden energy medicine, other people know about, and it's just like, oh, it's just a balance, it's just a correction. Because in Eden energy medicine, there is, and I'm not saying other kinesiologies don't have that, but I was not so much aware when I was working in some of the more yang kinesiologies, the level of sacredness that Donna really reinforces when you're working with somebody else's energy. And I really like that. Like I'm quite happy to hold somebody's points or circle in their chakra and watch the birds fly out the window and just be really, really present with the person that I'm working on instead of going from point to point to pause lock 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 to balance. Um, and that's one thing I really, really like about Eden Energy Medicine. And if I'm wandering or if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Um, the basic Eden Energy Medicine is a 2-year program. The first year is called Foundations, and basically anybody can take it. The interesting thing about this is every class you take, which is a 5-day class, there's 4 of them per each year, you have a written and a practice test to pass before you can go to the next level. And so it's quite thorough in covering what you need to know. Um, and then the second year they do more in-depth stuff and then you're considered a practitioner. The third year is basically doing 100 sessions on people and practicing all the different techniques that you've learned. And then the fourth year is learning how to do grid, which I don't know, Alexis, if you know this from other ways, but Donna presents it as something that she discovered that hardly anybody else works with, and regression. And many people practice regression. Anytime, some people would say anytime you're in a balance, you're in regression, but deliberately, if a client has a really knotty problem, to set up a very to prepare for it and then go into a regression specifically to find the situation that caused uh, the issue in a again in a really sacred space. I first learned regression when I was doing hypnosis. And so to learn the concept that, yeah, you can do a regression and then you do energy work while you're in the regression to balance the being who had the problem at that time, was a really cool concept for me to come across. I really, really like that. So that's like the 4-year progression. And as I said, only the first 2 years are required to become an Eden Energy Medicine practitioner, should one want to. Um, and we work with 9 different energy systems. We work with the meridians, and which you're all, I'm sure, familiar with, and the chakras, which you're all familiar with. We work with the aura. I wrote them all down somewhere because I'm never quite remember all the different ones. Um, the meridians, the chakra. work with the electrical system. There's a couple of particular techniques that we use to help um, support the electrical system in the body. We work with the five rhythms, which are the law of five elements in Touch for Health. Um, we work with the aura. We work with the radiant circuits, which are, you'll may be familiar with them as the extraordinary meridians. We work with the grid if you go on to year 4, which Donna considers it's like the chassis of the body. It's the deepest energetic structure within the body. That if someone has had a really bad illness or a really bad shock, it may break the grid, and the body has a number of processes to help support the body to carry on. But if you can repair that grid, then the body doesn't have to compensate in some really major ways. Um, I think there was one more. Anyhow, and the triple warmer. Donna had an autoimmune disease. Uh, I can't remember which one, but she cured herself. And from that, she became very sensitized to um, the system of triple warmer and spleen. And so triple warmer and spleen take a whole special place in her system. And so many of you have had Touch for Health, yes? Yeah. So when I first started doing Eden Energy Medicine, um, all my colleagues were like, you never sedate spleen and you always sedate triple warmer. And I'm like, what? And they're like, because it's a thing that Donna has. That triple warmer is connected um, to the fight or flight response. And we are all in fight or flight all the time in the world that we live in. And therefore, triple warmer needs to be sedated all the time. And that's not my experience because I don't come to it from that place. And I've asked many Eden Energy Medicine practitioners who are very experienced, what's the deal here? Um, and all I've been told is that because of Donna's autoimmune disease, and she has a particular bent around triple warmer and spleen. So, but if you come across that, you may also go, what? Really? That's not my experience. So, any questions about that? No. Okay. Yes,
I have,
Lisa.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood here. Is she saying, Donna Eden saying that you should sedate the triple heater and you're
And
saying you don't?
I sedate triple heater when it needs to be sedated. But
Okay.
for many Eden Energy Medicine practitioners, their belief system is that triple warmer needs to be sedated and spleen needs to be strengthened.
hmm
And so if I'm working on an Eden Energy Medicine practitioner and I go, oh, I need to sedate your spleen, they'll be like, don't sedate my spleen. And I'm like, well, that's what your body needs.
hmm
And
Okay.
it has to do with Donna's experience with autoimmune disease.
hmm Okay,
And
thank
so
you.
she really did have an overactive triple warmer, and her spleen needed a ton of work. And that's my experience.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. So I'm just talking from my experience of being a touch for health or going into Donna Eden's work I'd never come across that with anybody before, this whole triple warmer spleen thing. So, okay. So, I hope that you got the handout on the daily energy routine, maybe?
So I had shared the first PDF that you sent in our
Okay,
server. So it's there for anyone
yes,
to download. And then I didn't see that you had
excellent.
sent a different version of it until like after work. So I didn't share that one. But
That's totally fine. I have them both here, and um, so I will say the version that has, if you put them both on your server to access, the version that starts with the three thumps is the older version, and it has more content in it. And it has some content that I think is really valuable. And so you can, if you want to download them both, that's great. And you can compare the two.
okay, so I'm not going to do it right now because I don't want to cause a glitch in the recording for other people, but I'm going to take the other PDF and I'll add it to the study hall chat later for everybody who's watching, okay?
Great. Thank you. So, the four thumps you're probably familiar with from one of the mini classes that Alexis teaches. I first learned it in a kind of kinesiology called 3-in-1. And that was three thumps, and then Donna added a fourth thump. And this is all about getting grounded and getting your immune system working. And I'm going through these things because, why am I doing this? I'm doing this because the first thing I would do with you when you came into my office after we talked and I knew what you wanted to do would be I would check your basic energy systems. And the daily energy routine is a series of activities that people can practice between visits. And then when you come in, the first thing I would do would be to check all these things on you to make sure that your basic energies are flowing. Does that make sense? So, how I would check the four thumps, which you may already know, would be simply to have an accurate indicator muscle and then have the person touch their stomach points, have them and test, muscle test, have them touch their K27s, their kidney 27 points, test, have them put their hand over their thymus gland and test, and then have their put their hand over either, depending on, I'm easy. I put my hand over their spleen neurolymphatic on each side. Some people put it over the end point of the spleen on the side, and again test. And if any of those muscle test unlocking, then we tap those points. So I'm just going to tap them with you right now, if you don't mind. We'll tap the stomach point, and that helps us to ground. And I'm sure you all know these already. And we'll tap the K27 points to bring energy up to your brain so I don't put you to sleep. And so maybe some of this will come through, and you'll have the handout to remind you. And if you go on to YouTube and look up Donna Eden's daily energy routine, you'll find 100 different people demonstrating it. The thymus gland thump, and then the spleen thump. Now, I thump my neurolymphatics. Some of my Eden Energy Medicine colleagues thump the end point of the spleen meridian. And some of us make an 8 between the two. So if any of you muscle tested and your points unlocked, you could recheck and see if they are now locking. And then if you want to say anything, please share.
so the addition of stomach 3,
Yes,
what what is
to
this point?
ground.
Okay.
It's to ground.
So nothing else. It's just about like bringing in earth kind of energy in. Okay,
Yep,
cool.
down to that stomach toe to bring it down and up. Okay. Okay, so the next thing I would check on you, hold on, I've got this. Okay, so one of the things I would check is if your energies are crossing over. So I would ask you to look at parallel lines and test, and then look at an X and test. So you can try that. Now, because of my brain gym background, if you look at parallel lines, I don't care if you're weak or strong. I don't care if you lock or unlock, because it could be you're in a learning position, in which case that could be strong because I'm learning something new. But I do want your brain to be crossing over. So if you look at an X or imagine an X and your muscle unlocks, then I would have you do some cross crawls. And you probably all are familiar with cross crawls, which you can do sitting, standing, or lying down. In whatever way, shape, or form you want to do them. And then you can recheck your parallel lines and your cross. One thing that is really interesting and helpful in the handout that starts with the 3 thumps, on the second page, Donna talks about the homolateral crossover. And some of you may be familiar with this. I got a version of it when I learned Brain Gym, but the idea is that for people who are very homolateral, their brain doesn't cross over very easily. They may have trouble with reading or writing. They may be a little bit clumsy. They may drop things. Um, when you show them how to do the cross crawl and they persistently do the puppet crawl, the homolateral crawl, even though you're saying, remember, do opposite sides, and they keep doing the same side and they're not getting it clear, the homolateral crossover can really help develop those circuits in the brain. And basically, a person like that is more comfortable working on one side than the other. And so there's an exercise there where she has the people start with homolateral crawl and then do cross crawl and then do homolateral crawl and then do cross crawl and back and forth like that for a series to help build those crossover circuits. Does that make sense? And it's described in the daily energy routine that starts with the 3 thumps. They left that out in the later version, and I think that's a really good thing. Um, the next thing, you all probably already know how to check your central meridian by going down, and that should go down, and then moving your central meridian up, and that would be strong. You're probably all familiar with that. That's a test that I would do. And if going down is strong, coming up is weak, then I saw Hannah just do it. You're going to either flush, so you're going to muck it up. You're going to use the fuzzy glove technique and then bring it up several times and retest. Alexis, if the people who are on this call already know all this stuff, please just tell me to carry on. Okay. Okay. That's what we call the zip up. And then Donna has this something that she calls the hook up. And the hook up is when you use the middle finger, your circumflex finger, you put one in your belt. Oh, first you press your nose. You press your nose to see if your central and governing are hooked up. If that goes weak, or just because it feels good, you put your middle finger on your third eye, press gently in and up, and the other finger in your belly button. Again, you're pressing gently in and up, and that's going to hook up your central and governing meridians. You can also put your tongue on the roof of your mouth to help reinforce that. And sometimes when I wake up in the morning, if I don't have to get out of bed right away, I'll hold a hook up for even up to 10 or 15 minutes just to really get that circulation between the central and governing meridian going really well. So you might get a nice yawn, sigh, or deep breath. So how I test that one is I just press your nose. You may also know the Wayne Cook exercise if you from Brain Gym. And for that one, I test by asking the person to follow my fingers from right to left, expecting an unlocking, and from left to right from their position. And that should be strong because for you, if I go like that, that should be the way that you read, unless you're of a different cultural background. And when the way that we read switches us off, um, then it makes reading really hard. And you may know the Wayne Cook exercise, which is when you cross your leg over your knee and hold the bottom of your foot and your shin. So you're making a figure of 8 to get that energy to move and cross over and flow. And you may be familiar with that. Yes, no, yes, yeah. Okay. And then do the other side. With breathing and rocking if you like to rock. And then Donna likes to bring her fingers together with the thumb in the third eye to help bring attention to that prefrontal cortex, your brow chakra, and connecting across the corpus callosum. We check the aura by simply bringing our hands through the aura and out to the fingertips. And if that unlocks the muscle, then the aura needs some work. And how we work with the aura is by using the Celtic weave. The Celtic weave is the figure of 8 moving through the whole of the aura. So if you put your hands on your thighs and stand or sit, whatever's comfortable for you, and allow yourself to ground through your feet. And then grab your hands off, cleaning your tools, shake them off, hands on your thighs one more time. And then bring your hands to either side of your head until you can feel your aura, if you can. And then bringing your arms together and crossing over in a figure of 8, over the top, over the middle, and then over your legs. And then when you get down to the bottom, just roll your aura up and bring your hands to your heart. And you can repeat that if it feels good. I like to turn around and do it at the back of my aura as well. So when you come into my office, those are some of the energies that I will just check off the bat. And then I put you on the table, and then I do what's called a quick energy balance. And this is like a 15 or 20-minute energy massage. So on your back, laying on your front, I'll hook you up. I'll hold, there's some points at the back of your head that we call the electric points. And I'll just feel that your electrical system is running. I can just feeling for the energy that's moving through those points to let me know that you've got a good electrical system going on, because that's one of the keys to everything, is to having the electrics working in our body. And then, being me and some of us, we might call in your helpers. And then I'll have you roll over on through your front, and I'll just hold your at over your heart and over your sacrum, and just touch in. And then I'll start doing things like a neurolymphatic flush all the way down your spine. I'll do the belt flow, which is basically, you might be familiar, you're probably familiar with the belt flow, but I'll go around the middle and down the opposite leg, around the middle and down the opposite leg from both sides. And then I'll do the same thing from the shoulder across the back to the other side and down the legs. Again, the idea is that I'm I'm trying to make space for energy to flow. One of the keys for Eden Energy Medicine is that we are making space to allow the energy to flow in the body. Um, I work your gates, the gates of your hands and your feet, again, making space for energy to flow. I will do passes all the way down the body and across the body. Again, it feels lovely when someone does this for you. And then at the end, when you're still on your tummy, I'll put my hands on your back and I'll rock you. And the rocking is, if you've never experienced it, do it to have someone do it for you or do it for someone. It really, really, it's very calming to the nervous system. In Donna's world, she would say it calms the triple warmer. I think that it just reminds me of being a baby and being rocked. And it's just so simple and it feels so good. And you can feel sometimes that the body just wants you to go on and do this for like 3 to 5 minutes. Other bodies will don't need it for as long, but others really, really like it. Then I have you turn onto your back and I'll hook you up again. And then I will do your neurolymphatics. And oh, I'll do the belt flow again. Oh, do the crown pull to open that up. Uh, and so that's a bunch of stuff that I do before I even get started on you. And then once I've checked your and balanced all your daily energy routine systems, and I do the quick energy balance, then depending on what you came in for, I might do a 14, 28, or 42 muscle balance, or I might go through the finger modes and see which finger mode shows up. Or I might go through a variety of different um, areas that we work with in Eden Energy Medicine. I might ask, is it the aura that needs work? Is it the meridian system that needs work? Is it the elements that need work? So I will just really, depending on what it is you came in with, I will muscle test to find out what it is you need. And this is the point at which, SIPs can come up, or some SIPs points may come up, or some other thing that I've learned in another system. but it's in the context of having prepared the body to open up space um, for the energy to flow. I think one of the interesting things that I have found working in Eden energy medicine is the importance of making sure when like if I'm working with acupuncture points, that the acupuncture points are what we call regular and vital. I'm sure other systems have different words for it. So what that means is if I'm working on an acupuncture point, I will touch it with my finger pads and test, and I'm expecting that test to be strong. Then fingernails, because this is a polarity check, that should be weak. And if that's working, then I'll do a 3-finger notch on the point, and that should be strong. So then I know I have polarity in the point, and there's vitality to it before I even work with it. So that if I'm holding sedating points or strengthening points or any other point that comes up, I want to know that that point is going to work for me. And so there are times when we will, for example, if someone comes in and they need a certain process, say, especially with kidney or liver meridian, I will test every point on the kidney or liver meridian and make sure that every point on that meridian is working. It has polarity and it has vitality before I work with it, if that comes up. Does that make sense? Do you have any
Yep.
questions? I don't know if this is of any value. I hope that you're able to take something from it.
If you don't get the expected result when you're doing those challenges, what are you doing to open up
Oh,
and balance that point?
great. Thank you. Really, really simple. If this point is irregular, if any of this test or this test come back wrong, this is what I do. And what's really cool about this is that it can happen not just for points. Thank you for that question. It can also happen for organs. So I had a lady who came in with irritable bladder. And what I discovered when I was working with her was that her bladder did not have polarity. And so I would spend 3 to 5 minutes just putting my hand back and forth because the hand has different polarity front to back. And so just either with your fingers, depending on where you're working, or the whole of your hand, that can bring that polarity into the the point or the organ. Another thing you can do, hold on, I've got one, is if you just have a little crystal on the end of a string, you just twirl that crystal because the light goes through and the light going through it brings the whole rainbow of light colors. And that we use that for a lot of different corrections, just a crystal on a string. I'm sorry, I don't know where my crystal's gone. It's usually right here. So I might put a crystal on a string and do that. If I need it to have strength, I'll just hold it with 3 fingers until I feel the strength coming into it. And so hopefully these techniques will come in handy, I hope. The other thing that I discovered with a lady that had the bladder issue, and this could be for a muscle or an organ, I tested for homolaterality, and her bladder tested strong for being homolateral. So the fix for that was to simply go back and forth, homolateral to cross-lateral, homolateral to cross-lateral, either that or with my fingers or with my hand, back and forth to bring that movement up, across the tissue into play, to bring that alive. Does that make sense?
Are you doing that over her bladder?
Yes, I did. Yeah, and it helped. So I was, sorry, I've got to drink something. So I checked for polarity. So palm down, that should be strong. Back of my hand should be weak when I'm testing an organ, a muscle, or an acupoint. And then with an organ or a muscle, very simple. This is parallel lines versus cross lines. That's another way to do it if it's a small area and you've got good fingers that aren't arthritic. Or this, or this. Just signaling to the body to allow those energies to cross over. Because the idea that energies cross over is a really important aspect of Eden energy medicine and the way Donna sees how energy flows. Does that make sense?
So let me just be clear. So you do this check over her bladder area and check if
Yeah,
that's weak, strong, I mean
yes,
locked or unlocked, and then you check this.
yes,
Okay. All right.
yes. Try it. If you've got a sore muscle or something, that, or an organ that you're concerned about.
I have a client with a prolapsed bladder. I saw her
Okay.
today and I did the thing that you suggested, Alexis. So she's going to do that at home too. So I'll see her next week and I'll do that with her. Thank you.
And just see. And what I also had this woman, I gave that as homework, just to go back and forth with her hands and then to do X's and straight lines. So I made her do this over her bladder. I asked her to do this. I didn't make her, can't make anybody do anything, damn it. Wouldn't that be nice? So yeah, and that did help.
Wonderful. It's exciting. This woman, she's so excited if it will change her life because it's prolapsed and it's very tiny and she's, spending her day. So thank you.
Yes, yes. I'd love to hear, you know. So, is there, okay, do you have any questions for me?
I have one. I'm wondering because you started with Touch for Health, right? Um,
Yes.
did you notice? I understand this is time ago, but did you notice a difference when you started doing those extra pre-checks and that extra like the energy balance at the beginning to how receptive people were or how the balance is held or anything like that?
I if if they are willing to do the homework, if they're willing to do at least some of the exercises that they are unlocking when they're supposed to be locking, when it should be locking, if they will follow up with that, it does support it. And that's a whole philosophical discussion. Does it support it because it's reminding of them of what their goal is and they're feeling like they're doing something about it? Probably a combination of both, getting the energy to flow as well as reminding them of where they want to be moving forward toward. Did I answer your question? What I find, what I do enjoy, what is very interesting to me is if I test but don't correct any of those energy systems that come in, I just check where they're at. And then I do the quick energy balance, that whole series of like 20 minutes of different movements on their body to help the energy to flow. And then I test their energy system. A lot of the things that were out to start with are now fixed. And that's one of the points of doing the quick energy balance at the beginning, is just to get some of those basic systems talking to each other before I do anything else. And then it's like I'm clearing away more of the superficial imbalances, and I can go deeper with with the work that is on the table for the day. Then the things that show up are going to be deeper. Does that make sense?
Paige, can I
Plus
take
people love
this?
it. It feels great.
Can
Go
I
ahead,
take this off the rails a little bit for a second here?
please.
Okay, cool. Um, because I'm thinking as I'm listening to
Yeah.
you talk, because you've mentioned several times that idea of creating space in the energy
Yes.
systems, right?
Yes.
And as I was fixating on fascia really, really hard for like a year and a half there while I was writing about it, the more I fixated on that, the more I became convinced that it's not that meridians run through fascia, it's that meridians are fascia. Like fascia is the thing that the electricity is moving through when we're measuring it on that level. So when you're talking about creating space, are we really just unwinding tissue to some extent so that things are able to move in different ways? Do you see that? How do you see that? That idea of creating space? Like I can get it, for instance, if we're talking about meridian flow, it kind of makes sense. You can visualize that. Okay, the meridian gets compressed when my body is stressed and tense. I can see that as a visual.
Yes.
But if I'm talking about like my aura, it's harder to think about how does that like how does that need space or does it just already take up the same amount? Like, and I'm just curious how you see it because I'm now thinking about it. Does that make sense?
No, I love that. And I think uh, and I've been in a, I swear it was a class with you that I learned to find the center of the aura, which is over here, and then to bring it back where it needs to go. Didn't I learn that from you?
That sounds like my assemblage point thing, right?
Oh,
It's like shifting the
this
assemblage
was,
point and then putting the
yeah,
aura back on top of it. Yeah.
okay. Well, I didn't get that point because, you didn't teach me your way of doing assemblage point, but it was just the idea that in that case that the space was in the wrong place. So and in energy medicine, there's a concept of having tears or holes in the aura, which you're all probably familiar with, but also having toxins in the aura and being able to remove those toxins, which again you may be very familiar with from other kinesiologies, but just that those are preventing the movement of the flow of energy. So that's even we need space because we need the energy to flow. Does that make sense? So even in the aura, you've got to, we're doing this and we're doing this and we're doing this because there's no flow. So it's a combination of flow and space. And we need the space so the flow can happen, but we also need to encourage the flow. I sound like I'm babbling, but it makes sense to me.
No, it's interesting, and I'm thinking about it, right, in the context of
Yeah,
the way I like to work. So thank you.
thank you. Come on, more questions. Give me Lisa. Thank
I
you.
have, I have a question. I've always had a zillion questions. Um,
Good.
so could you explain to me what your understanding of polarity is? because I work with it, I find whatever, and I don't really understand what it is. And I had somebody the other day that polarity was screaming through the entire session, which I've never seen before. And it might be related to um, geopathic problems, and they'd had their house dosed. Not, that's not the right word. Um, what's the word? Dosing?
Doused. They doused the house.
Dowsing,
They
right,
cleaned the
sorry.
house. They
Yeah.
doused to find
They
out
just
where the
all this,
problems were.
yeah, they did all this dowsing and whatever, and they just had that done, and then I saw him, and I've just never seen that. I'm just wondering if you could explain what you mean by polarity.
Okay, Alexis, you might want to chime in on here because I mean, for me, polarity would be a big treatise on where it is everything from the way electrics are positive and negative to like the polarity between my thoughts of yes and no to the Tao and the yin yang of everything. It's just the problem of opposites and how so it's like, are we talking metaphysical polarity? Or are we talking physical polarity? Alexis, would you like to chime in?
I mean,
Very,
that was
very good question, Lisa. That would be a question for a group of, I would love to have that question with a bunch of really, yeah, carry on, Alexis, sorry.
I love your answer that you just gave because a lot of the work I'm doing right now is really looking at dualities in energy, right? So we're talking about yin and yang, we're talking about Shakti Chi, we're talking about, all of
Left
those
and right.
things. Yeah, magnetoelectric, electromagnetic, whatever.
Yes.
Typically, however, especially from like a brain integration point of view, you're talking
Hmm.
about a negative positive electrical flow. So the same way that you have a battery and a battery has a negative pole and a positive pole, and electrons run in a specific way in a circuit. It's like everything is supposed to have a specific polarity. And when we look at the brain, because the brain is electrical, polarity is what runs how those commissural fibers stretch across the hemispheres. So in brain integration, usually what they mean is like, how is electricity running from here to here? Is it going from here to here, from here to here, or is it not going? Right? And that's sort of the condensed version of that. And then it gets to be much more interesting if we think about it in a bigger way, like Paige was just doing.
Right. And just so in terms of what I've been talking about, it's the idea that there is a difference between the field of this side of my hand and the field of this side of my hand. There's a difference there. And so I call that polarity, so that this is going to have a different response than this is going to have a different response. And that when I'm working with the body, um, I'm looking for a different response when I do this versus when I do this, to know that there is a force field that attracts and repels, so that I've got these opposites going on, whether it's in an organ or in a acupoint or in the polarity of my body, because that's another test I check. Uh, is the polarity of my body in sync with the polarity of the earth? And what's not in I don't think they talk about this, is having to help us ground, to spoon your feet with a spoon that has a magnetic, will attract a magnet, to spoon your feet, to spoon your hands, even to spoon your neck, to help clear like a buildup of electrons that interfere with that electrical flow. The big one that in Eden Energy Medicine we do is on our feet, on the soles of our feet, to spoon your feet on a regular basis to clear the field between your feet and the earth, because most of us wear shoes that are insulating, that prevent us from talking to the earth. And so this helps clean up any fritz in the field. That's my technical term for it. Um, but I have colleagues who will also do this if they want to clear out their throat chakra, clear stuff, and they found it to work. So having a spoon that magnet will stick to is helpful to clear different spots of your body, just to play with. It's called
Paige.
spooning your feet. I'm sure it's on YouTube.
I've not seen that one before, but it was just occurring to me that like you could tell everyone that's the hot new beauty. Like I use this spoon across my face to build collagen, like a jade roller, you know? And we
Absolutely.
could get everyone
Although
doing it that way.
a jade roller would be nice. Or rose
Sorry,
quartz.
I feel like I cut you off, Mark. Sorry.
Yes, Mark.
I was just going to say with the polarity thing, is it like when it does show up, is it like having your torch batteries in the wrong way and you don't get anything happening, or do you get sort of some energy happening but not to its optimum?
Both can happen. In fact, when we're working with acupuncture points in Eden Energy Medicine, they call them reversed. So that's if this is supposed to be strong, weak, then if it's weak, strong, that would be reversed. Oh, I just had it. Or it could be frozen because I'm either getting a strong, strong or a weak, weak. Or it might even, I can't access it, which means it's submerged. The acupuncture point is so far gone that it's hard to reach it. And then you just have to work to bring it back to the surface where it can be, where you can talk to it. So I think it could be a lot of different things. Please, anybody who wants to say anything, add to this. We're all professionals here. This is our back and forth. Tell me I'm wrong and tell me what's right. I'm always open to that. Yeah. Did that answer your question, Mark?
That was great. Yeah.
Oh,
It's,
good.
it's
Thank
something
you.
I come up with polarity and I do sips on it if it shows.
Oh, yeah.
Um, but it's interesting, like what it is we're actually reaching further afield and correcting. Like, what is the dilemma? What's the issues when polarity shows up?
Right. And for me, if it's an acupuncture point, it's just like that. I'm not getting those positive and negative responses. And even with that bladder, uh, that was a mess. That there just wasn't flow there. I think it was a electrical charge wasn't moving properly, but nothing was really moving in it. So it was a combination of getting both the polarity working as well. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Thanks so much.
You're welcome. Thanks.
So this is kind of a big question, but what would be some of the kinds of things that you would see if the polarity is off, say with the bladder or whatever? What is it interfering with the physiological functioning of the bladder or what? I mean, I know it's a broad, like depending on where you are, there could be a million things, but just an idea.
Exactly. Well, from the standpoint that we are electrical beings, and Alexis can talk way more about the electromagnetic and the magneto-electric than I can, because I've just taken the course. I don't teach it. Um, it can be simply that electricity isn't you haven't got that negative and positive activity going on that you have to wake up. And but then there's not going to be, if that positive and negative charge isn't moving back and forth, you're not going to have any flow across the tissue either. Does that make sense? Can you visualize that? It's like if you have flow through an electrical wire, it's moving its way down, positive, negative, positive, negative. That's what gets the flow going. I don't know if I'm making sense.
Well, I like with this woman I have who has a prolapsed, not uterus, a prolapsed bladder.
Hmm.
I have sort of the impression that because she had a hysterectomy, that everything down there is traumatized,
Yes.
and therefore, it can't resurrect itself, so to speak. And put itself back in position. And Alexis gave me exercises that we did them, but she's going to do them at home to like move it around to give it a chance to loosen up. But if the polarity, for example, is off, then yeah, all the signals aren't getting there. So
And
that makes
right.
sense.
And that's why I would be doing this and this on it, but also moving it, because that as well will wake it up. It's like a muscle that isn't working properly. What can help is also simply to move it, and that it can be active movement or passive movement, right? I mean, I'm not saying to passively move her blood, you know, I don't know where her bladder is. So, but yeah, to move it will also wake it up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. What were you just doing your finger modes there?
No, I was doing an
Oh, your
X,
muscle testing.
parallel lines and a crossing lines, parallel
Oh,
lines and crossing lines.
I gotcha.
Again, it depends on how agile your fingers are, or this
Mhm.
parallel crossing. And that's just
Okay.
to get a different aspect of crossing over.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. All right, thank you.
Okay. So I just want to say, so at the end of my sessions, so I start with the checking the basics, and then I'll do the quick energy balance to help sort, to get that, to make space and get the energy to flow with all the different things I'm doing. Then I'll do the session work based on what they need and based on muscle testing and based on using finger modes, whatever comes to mind. And then at the end of the session, there'll be some integration, which will be, again, will be strokes across the body, will be doing the hookup. So their central and governing are well hooked up. Um, and doing what we call the kidney wave, where you get on their feet and you push their feet back and forth, and you can feel and see the movement going all the way from the feet up to the head to get that flow going. And that's how I end the session.
Okay, I have another question if I may. Um,
Sure.
when you're talking about the central vessel and governing vessel not hooking up, now I understand the concept that they are together, but how would that something like that manifest if they're not hooked up? Or
Well,
just not familiar,
some
that idea I'm not familiar with.
sometimes, well, it could be a variety of different things, because the central and governing are like your main batteries. And if they're not hooking up and flowing well, then they're not going to feed the rest of the meridians, and the rest of the meridians aren't going to have a place to shoot excess energy easily. And so it could um, show up in a lot of different ways. So that's why even in a touch for health balance, you always check that central and governing are functioning before you do anything else. And this is just um, That's the test. That's the correction. And that's just to so that the two of them are working. One really simple symptom might be foggy brain, not being able to think clearly. But my suggestion is that you practice the hookup for 3 to 5 minutes a day and see how it feels to you. If you can actually notice a difference when you're hooked up versus when you're not. If you can feel when it hooks up and if you can notice anything. And for those of us who's not been very well hooked up, it can take a bit longer to recognize when they do start to hook up. And that can be as simple as a yawn, a sigh, or a deep breath, when they start to really flow together. Did I answer your question, Lisa?
Yes, I'm very excited. Thank you. I really appreciate you being here, and I've learned a lot and I have lots of ideas, and I'm all excited.
Good.
Thank you.
And look at the handouts because there's lots of simple, effective things in there. And if they don't make sense, you can always Alexis has my number, and I love to talk about this stuff. And also, it's all over YouTube. All kinds of Eden energy medicine people that are fiery and don't mind going out, putting themselves out there will show you how to do it on the internet. Or you can Zoom me and I'll teach it to you.
Well,
Be happy to do that.
I have some of her books and I've dabbled a little bit in it, but there's such a huge benefit to hearing someone talk about it and show it. And it's like, okay, now I feel like I can open the book and
Yeah,
start to
because
dive
her
into
book is full of really is like year one. Her
it.
book is like year one. For
Hmm.
$15, learn year one, or spend thousands of dollars and learn year one.
Right. Good start. Thank you.
Yeah. Any questions? Lexus has my number. I'm happy to talk about this stuff because I love it. Thank you very much for your attention. I know an hour is a long time to spend in our busy lives, so I appreciate it.
Thank you, Paige. I really enjoyed listening to you talk about all of it. And
Thank
I mean,
you.
I don't know about everybody here. When we were going through those exercises, none of them unlocked for me. I felt like everything was on just fine, and yet every single exercise I did with you, I also felt it do something, right? And I had
Yes.
my big yawn and I had my little moment of like, oh, that's clearer now. So it's a
Yeah.
good reminder of the things that we have in our toolkit to use on ourselves all the time, even if we aren't, broke in or really needing it at that moment, it's still helpful.
Right.
Um, so this recording is just for our little group of members. So it's going to be available to the people like on our Telegram channel and on our in our Discord server. I'm going to put it on YouTube, but it'll be unlisted. So I'm going to make sure everybody has access to the link, and Paige, I'll send you the link as well. So if you want to share it with anybody, but it's not necessarily public. And
Right.
any
Sure.
any
Thank you.
last any last questions or anything for Paige before we turn off the recording? We don't have to all leave, but I'm going to turn off the recording. All right. In that case, I'll just say thank you again, and I will turn this off.